Hello everybody, I decided to make this tutorial because I know that many people have difficulties using stock Atlantis in Orbiter 2016, and I think it's a pretty fun vessel to fly it, as many people have difficulties even to take Atlantis on stable orbit, and actually it's possible to bring it to rendezvous with ISS and back to Cape Canaveral. I decided to show it how I make these things. All this tutorial will be done in one stint, without additional takes, without shortcuts, editing, and you can count this as an advanced tutorial. I assume that you already pretty experienced in Orbiter simulator, and because I will not be explaining what is orbit planes aligning, or how you need to synchronize the orbits. The goal of this tutorial is to show and explain things that is specific for Atlantis, that is different from the Delta glider, for example. What the timing is, what the number is, and that's the goal. For this tutorial I use almost stock orbiter installation. Why almost? The first is Orbiter 2016, the second is OrbiterSound add-on, of course, the third is D3D9 renderer, and fourth, and the only add-on that change the functionalities, is a Fuel MFD. Link to the downloading is in the description of this video. Fuel MFD is used for pumping fuel between the vessels, and I will use it to gain some additional fuel from the ISS once we docked with it. Someone may consider it as a cheat, but actually you can make this flight without additional fuel, but I needed to make a more predictable re-entry burn, for more predictable deorbiting. As I said, you can do deorbiting without additional 5 tons of fuel that we're gonna take from ISS. Especially if you spending less fuel in initial maneuvers. Make it more precisely than me in this tutorial. But as the Atlantis model, stock Atlantis model, is pretty overrated, as was reported, I think it's a fair trade-in to use slightly more fuel for the orbit burn. All options, all realism options is enabled in this tutorial. It's a complex flight model, non-spherical gravity sources, and so on. Stock Atlantis doesn't have a damage model. For this tutorial I used a scenario called launching into sunrise. It's within Space Shuttle Atlantis folder. It's one of default Orbiter 2016 scenarios. So we are ready and start. First things first, we need to set ISS frequencies in our COM MFD. It's a frequency for long-range ISS transponder on NAV1 and one of the dock transponder in NAV2. Also we use NAV2 frequency for attitude MFD. It's a autopilot And also we need to set ISS as a target in all our MFDs. It's an orbit MFD, which we also set in equatorial type of frame to get the equatorial inclination. We set the ISS as a target in align MFD on the left, in sync MFD, synchronicity, also we will use Ascent autopilot for the Atlantis. It's a stock autopilot. We set the map MFD orbit lines to draw as orbit planes. And now, as ISS inclination, equatorial inclination, is 51.6 degrees, we need to set such inclination on the autopilot, Ascent autopilot on left MFD. Orbit altitude, we left it as 350 kilometers. And very important thing, we need to off the MS2 burn. We don't need it, so we disable it. It wasn't always worked properly, and anyway, we don't need it. We will do it by ourselves. Next, we need to wait for launch window. It is the time then ISS trajectory just crosses our current location. We set the right map MFD in tracking mode, and we use the zoom age, and then on this map the ISS appears. It will be just a good time for launching the Ascent autopilot. Okay, we now see it. We now see ISS approaching, and it's a good time to start launch. Just checking the inclination again. Yes.
Attitude off.
It's not a launch into sunrise anymore, but we will see enough sunrises once we successfully dock with ISS. On the align MFD on the left, we can see as a relative inclination is decelerating at a very high rate, but it's still, of course, too much and far beyond the shuttle capabilities. "30 seconds before SRB's decoupling." As we're exiting the dense air, we hear now that sound is saturating to nothing. Decoupling.
Houston, Comstring checkout, Comstring 1 checkout, part A. We're in step 2, looking for your go.
We can see that the main engines is still working. Actually, we don't hear it because my recording software somehow isn't able to record the rear audio channels, but you can see that main engine is working on the top left corner. Its indicator shows it's full throttle. Relative inclination is reducing already to 5 degrees, but it's still far too much. But it continues to decelerate. Continue to reduce. And also our altitude is increasing, but at some point the shuttle will do a little dive back to the surface until he reach altitude about 80 kilometers. It's a normal behavior. The main thing that we continue to gain the orbital speed. 80 kilometers is pretty high, and there is no much density there, so it's not a big deal. We change HUD to orbit mode. We can see that ISS is catching us from behind, and our orbital planes is pretty close already. Our relative inclination is just less than 3 degrees. But it is still too much for the Atlantis. And this is the point. There our velocity vector is going below the horizon. So from now we started to make a little dive, as I said before. But even if our altitude is reducing, our orbital speed is increasing.
Houston, Discovery for step 4, LDRI TPC, you command
180 degrees roll. It is done by autopilot also. It is a preparation for separation with the main tank, main tank. Then he will be out of fuel. You can see that our relative inclination with ISS is continuing to reduce. Engines is still working. Altitude is 90 kilometers and continues to reducing.
Block 12 and 13. Block 12 is complete, 13 is in work, Houston.
But as the altitude reducing, you can see that orbital speed is increasing at a pretty high rate. Some plasma effect, as there is a not so dense but still some air there. Our relative inclination is less than 1 degree now, and it is good enough.
Go ahead, Tim.
Here we go.
Okay, we at the lowest point of our dive, and now we started to rise again, since we gain pretty good orbital speed now. You can see that apogee is increasing pretty fast now, but at this point the fuel in the main tank is out. We decouple the tank, and autopilot will turn in the engines that is fired from the inner fuel tanks or the shuttle. That's it. You can see in the upper left corner that engine is working. This engine has a much less thrust, of course, and because of that, orbital speed and apogee altitude is increasing not so fast. We need some time to wait until our apogee will reach as the targeted 350 kilometers altitude. ISS is directly behind us, as you can see on the map MFD. I accelerate the time, waiting for autopilot to raise our apogee to 350 kilometers. Now it is almost done. Yes, autopilot is switched off. Now we have about 11 minutes till ascending node. Or you can see it in the left MFD, align plane MFD. So we now turn the ship anti-normal, preparing for the aligning burn. It will be a 270 seconds burn, which is pretty much. Our perigee is still not high enough, but we will take care of it later, after the plane alignment. Some time accelerating. As the Atlantis engines are tilted 15 degrees, we need to point the bottom cross toward the vector, towards the antinormal vector. Not the center of the screen, but the bottom cross, as I did now. This way the burn will be as efficient as possible. I started the engine now. You can see this is alignment burn. And on the align MFD you can see that relative inclination starting to reduce again. And hopefully it will reduce to 0. Also we have 900 seconds to apogee, but we will deal with it after we end it with align burn. I accelerate time because it's a really long burn. I have 10 tons of fuel left for now. Ten seconds of burn time left. And relative inclination is 0, 0, 0. Perfect. Now we need to deal with our apogee and perigee. We turn prograde. And it's time to think about synchronizing our orbits. We turn the ship prograde, but remember that we need to point the bottom cross towards the velocity vector, not the center of the screen.
Translation, rotation.
So I align the bottom cross with the velocity vector because our engines are tilted. And started and fire the engines. We need to raise our apogee to 360 kilometers, which is altitude of ISS, and rise our perigee. Of course, both of them are rising, but at different rate, because we are close to apogee point. Our perigee is above 100 kilometers, so we can consider it as a already pretty stable orbit. And now, as our apogee is reach 360 kilometers, we turn off the engines. Now we need to raise the perigee, but we will do it more closely to the apogee point, because we don't need to raise it now. Since our ship is slightly ahead of ISS in orbit, we need to make our orbit, our apogee, slightly higher than ISS in order to ISS catch us. So our perigee will be the point of rendezvous. Again, align the bottom cross with velocity vector and started the burn again to raise the perigee. A little more aligning and start. No, it's too early still. We need to be close to apogee to make the orbit as close with to make it more round, the eccentricity more close to zero. Another burn. And since I can't use prograde hotkey for the for aligning the ship prograde, because I need to align the bottom cross prograde, I constantly needed to align the ship manually. And now I again turn off the engines, and another burn will be even close to apogee point. Another one burn. You can see now that perigee is increasing a lot and apogee stays the same. We now 360 kilometers high above the surface, which is the altitude of ISS. So this will be our perigee, and now we need to raise the apogee to make our orbit longer, so that ISS can catch us. And this will be the rendezvous point. See it on the left MFD, on sync MFD. We can see that on our third round around the Earth, we will catch the ISS. Delta T is now 3 seconds, and we fine-tune it with the RCS engines in translation mode.
Translation.
A little more forward. And yes, now we have a delta T 0 seconds and relative inclination 001, which is almost perfect. Now all we have is wait. Time acceleration. Okay, rendezvous will be at the end of this round. Delta T is 3 seconds, but we will reduce it with our RCS engines, turning the ship prograde. Actually, for RCS engines we don't have to align the bottom cross, but it's not a big difference. But it is better for more predictable burning of RCS engines in translation mode. It's better to point the center of the screen towards the vector. And you can see on the left that delta T is reducing again. Yes, it's perfect. 0. Actually, ISS is now 140 kilometers from us. We can see it on docking MFD on the right. But if we'll be in Delta Glider, maybe we could. It could be possible to directly fly directly to it, but shuttle doesn't capable of it. We have only 5 tons of fuel left, so we need to wait for a more closing position. Now distance is less than 20 kilometers, and we are still waiting. We turn the ship in anti-velocity vector. We change the HUD to docking mode, and this is the relative velocity in the center of our screen. This is anti-velocity vector. And on the docking MFD we can see the closing velocity. Our goal is then the closing velocity will be 0. We should reduce relative velocity in the center of the screen. Now we should close it. We should reduce it to 0 too. Simply speaking, then ship will be at minimal possible distance now of the ISS on our current orbit. We should stop. But now we still closing, and we do nothing but waiting for the right moment. Time acceleration. We don't need sync MFD now, but we're gonna need attitude MFD soon. So I change the right MFD to attitude MFD. It's autopilot for aligning angular position of the ship with the docking port that is currently on nav2 receiver. It also a stock autopilot, and it's pretty useful, especially when you have your docking port is located on the top of ship, like in Atlantis. Without it, it will be pretty difficult to dock in. Still closing and still trying to keep anti-velocity vector aligning with our main engine's thrust vector. The distance is 10 kilometers. You can see now that closing velocity is reducing and relative velocity is increasing. We are close to the point where we soon start to heading away from ISS. So soon it will be time to burn the main engines to stop our ship relative to ISS. Well, now it's time, and I started the main engine full throttle, and now I need to make our relative velocity 0. We're 8.5 kilometers from the station. And we have 5 tons of fuel left. We are heading the ship towards the ISS. Align the thrust vector with ISS and burn the main engines again to make the final closing with ISS. 5 meters per second, and fine-tune the velocity vector with the help of RCS engines in translation mode. While we are closing, it's a good time to open the cargo bay doors, since our docking port is hiding inside the cargo bay. Yes, it's night, but I don't know if you can see it, but doors is now open. Increasing speed even more to about 10 meters per second. accelerate time and fine-tune the velocity vector with the linear RCS engines. Bay doors are now open. We are 5 kilometers from the ISS. We're on the night side of the planet, so all we can see now is the HUD indicators, but it's not a problem actually. We are 3 kilometers away from the station, and it's a good time to choose the docking port. We set our nav to frequency to docking port, and we show it on HUD, and it's pretty good. We could dock here. It's not on the far side of the station, as it sometimes could be. Now we're heading towards the third HUD square from the station. It will be a close enough distance to ISS for making a final orientation.
Rotation.
And again, I make the final adjustments of velocity vector with the RCS engines in translation mode. We're 2 kilometers from the station.
Translation.
Less than 1 kilometers per station from station.
Rotation.
Our speed is pretty big, so it's time to reduce it. I will try to reduce my speed with the linear RCS thrust.
Translation.
I choose the forward-mounted. I use the forward-mounted engines for this. Speed is reducing pretty slowly, but it's okay. I think it will be 0 just at the time when we reach the approaching path. "300 meters from station."
Rotation.
I will try to roll the shuttle properly, since our docking port is mounted on the top of is headed top of our ship. Actually, it's not needed. The attitude autopilot will do this for us, but the initial angular orientation won't hurt. Well, actually, I missed some a little. Now I need to stop completely. That means reduce velocity vector to 0.
Rotation.
We're 140 meters from the ISS docking port, and I am slightly off the approaching path.
Translation.
I will fix it with the RCS engines.
Rotation.
I'm constantly switching from rotation to linear mode of RCS because if nose of the ship is headed directly towards the station, the linear RCS thrust is more predictable. They don't give the speed in other axes this way. For example, not changing our closing velocity or so on. So we can make a predictable orientation within the approaching path. It's a pretty boring procedure, but we already close enough, so it should end soon. Okay, we're close enough, I think. No, still not. We need to align even more to the approaching path. We have less than 4 tons of fuel now.
Houston, if you like that attitude, we load it in, we'll give you the item 19. Okay, we'll hold off and maneuver on your call.
Okay, that's good enough. We activate the attitude autopilot, and it started to orientate our ship in order that docking ports will have the proper orientation angular orientation. As you can see on left MFD, on dock MFD, the angular orientation is perfect thanks to autopilot, and all we can do now is make a dimensional orientation, and after that, or even before that, increase the closing velocity. As we now directed our top of the ship directed towards the station, we change the closing velocity with the up and down linear RCS thrust keys, and we're aligning it, our ship with the left, right, and forward and back keys of the RCS thrust. It's a little confusing first time, but you can get used with it pretty soon. Just checking, yes, was oriented just right. We are 100 meters from the station, from the docking port, and closing to 1 meter per second. All we should do now is just to align the ship with the left, right, and forward, backward RCS engines. "50 meters to the docking port." I reduce the closing velocity with the upper RCS engines. Now we're closing at half a meter speed. "20 meters to station." "10 meters to station." "5 meters to station," and I reduce my speed to 9 centimeters per second. It's a completely safe speed. And now I need to prepare for docking. As soon as the ship will be docked, I need to cancel the switch off the autopilot. Is CNC button which I pointed my cursor at. 1 meter per station, 1 meter to station. And we docked in. Congratulations. Attitude autopilot is switched off, and we can see that we are docked. We now purge the satellite that inside our cargo bay now, because we don't need additional 4 tons of weight while we will be landing. We change our frequencies to the frequencies of Cape Canaveral, the long range transponder, and runway 33 transponder on nav2. So we are prepared for the orbiting already. HCI MFD, we set it to Cape Canaveral, set our target on map MFD to Cape Canaveral. And now fuel MFD, that's it. ISS have 5 tons of fuel, and we pump it to our ship. Actually, we now have 3.3 tons of fuel, which is I think enough for deorbiting, but to make it more predictable, we pump it in, and now we have more than 8 tons of fuel. That's a good amount that let us do a pretty predictable deorbit burn and deorbiting itself. Now we should wait until we have a proper deorbiting window, so the trajectory is lying through above the Cape Canaveral. We change the orbit lines mode to ground track drawing, and we will be deorbiting on the next round. Yeah, now we 18,000 kilometers from Cape Canaveral. We prepare for undocking. I should say that the re-entry method, aerodynamical maneuvers that I'll be using, it's not realistic. The real space shuttles never did like this, not this altitudes, not these angles, but since we within the simulator and our Atlantis model is looks and behaviors like this, it's a pretty good method to make our ship to land there we want it to land, and that's what we want now. I'm preparing for undocking. We're 15,000 kilometers away, and I undock. And yes, I'm approaching away from the station and started to close the cargo bay doors. Yes, they're closing now.
Rotation.
Satellite is already fly away somewhere. Door is closed, and now we have to turn the ship retrograde. We will start deorbit and burn for about 10,000 kilometers from the Cape Canaveral. If we would have had less fuel left than we have now, we could burn even early. But now I think 10,000 kilometers from it is pretty enough. And remember again, we should align the bottom cross with the retrograde vector. That's it. I started the deorbit burn. You can see in the top left screen that the engine is working, full thrust, and our perigee is reducing. Our altitude is still 370 kilometers, so it should we should wait till we will be actually within the atmosphere. But now burn is continuing. Perigee is reduced to 200 kilometers. As you can see on the map MFD, there is a night over the USA, so we will be landing at night. It's more difficult, but it's not a problem. Okay. Perigee at 100 kilometers. You can see that now we have 5 tons of fuel left, and it's 55 kilometers per G above the surface. It means that we could enter the atmosphere and could land without additional fuel from ISS. But it will be a long deorbiting path. and not completely predictable. But actually, if my maneuvers, especially my initial inclination, would be more precise, I could save more fuel. Okay, perigee is under the surface, and we can see that our orbits on map MFD became just a flight path. It's not a circle anymore. It would be perfect if we will be able to make the final point of the path just near the Cape Canaveral. But I don't think that we have enough fuel to do that long deorbit burn. We should save for about 2 tons of fuels for emergency maneuvers, some sort. As a runway 33 has a 330 degrees heading, as you can notice from its name. It means that we should head for it from southeast to northwest in order to approaching it on the right path. So it would be perfect if we approach it from the just southeast of Florida. Okay, we ended the burn. We have slightly less than 2 tons of fuel. Now we turning the head prograde. We're still far above the atmosphere now. And now we turn the ship, make it do horizon. Now we should turn it to horizon level. So with the H key, or sorry, with the L key. Well, our ship is oriented at horizon level. It's heading prograde, and we accelerate. We're accelerating until we had an altitude of 100 kilometers. It's there the atmospheric re-entry begins. Well, we're still pretty high above the surface, and I think we gonna a little overshoot the Cape Canaveral. So we will need to make a pretty sharp aero maneuvering. Okay, altitude is less than 100 kilometers. We turn off the horizon level and prepare the ship for aerodynamic maneuvering. Now we're still using RCS engines, and we turn the ship, we roll it left. As I said, it's not a realistic shuttle maneuvers, but it works in the game. The most effective altitude for maneuvering is from 28 to 35 kilometers above the Earth, above the surface. It has a pretty dense air for maneuvering, but still not so dense that it reduces your speed a lot. So now we just wait until we enter this dense atmosphere, while we are flying away past the Cape Canaveral.
Attitude off.
We turned off the RCS engines, and now we use the aero surfaces of our shuttle, which is already working, as we see. And we can notice that our course is start to change. Now we're directly east of Cape Canaveral. 50 kilometers, and our speed is still almost orbital, over 7 kilometers per second. Okay, we're entering the dense atmosphere. Density is increasing. Don't try this on Delta Glider with damages enabled, or your ailerons will kiss you goodbye. But since the Atlantis don't have this simulation, we could do such a sharp aerodynamic turns. We don't want to go under the 30 kilometers, so we do some rolls, and you can see on map MFD as our path is changed very sharply. We are now northeast of Cape Canaveral, about 500 kilometers from it. But now at least we are heading directly toward it. Another slight tuning. And yes, now we approaching directly to it. We could see it on HCI left indicator, HSI left indicator, and right indicator is tuned to runway 33, and it's now out of range yet. At this altitude, the speed reduces very slowly, so this should be enough for us to gain the coast of Florida to reach the Cape Canaveral. I'm heading more to the south because, as I said, a glide path to the runway 33 is from southeast to northwest, so we will need some room to make the final turn. 30 kilometers altitude, 2.5 kilometers speed, and distance 200 kilometers. Glide path is pretty smooth for now. It's about 5 degrees, which is good enough. (102 KSC). We could slowly turn to the runway. The difficulty of night landing is that you have only two colors, black and yellowish. It's not easy to notice some points here. .50 kilometers, and we're still out of range of runway 33 transponder. Okay, we can see a runway now at the right path of the screen. We can see it visually, even if we still haven't it yet on the HCI MFD, and I started the final turn. Okay, we have it on the indicator. We are approaching pretty good. We have a glide path about 30 degrees down. It's a pretty steep angle, but it's not a problem. Of course, it's not a problem here, since the stock Atlantis doesn't have any damage or thermal model. Joystick could be useful here, but I don't have one.
2,500.
Gear deployed.
Gear is deployed. .20 degrees glide path, which is good, but we are off the axis.
400. 300.
Time to deploy the air brakes.
100.
Speed brake deployed.
Yes, it is deployed.
40. 30. 20. 10.
Well, pretty smooth landing. Now I'm apply the gear brakes and try to align the ship with the center of the runway. It's not easy with the shuttle. Oh, and I have some visual glitch here. I'm switched now to the external camera. Oh yeah, we're almost at the center. Still applying the gear brakes. And we stopped. That's it. Hope this helps. And good luck, happy landings, and Godspeed.